An ongoing effort. We all need to remain vigilant, and Congress may act on this as well.
Yeah, thank you, Brad, also from Utah. One thing that I would encourage, and I hope the direction you might take, is you clearly can't regulate content. That would be impossible. But what I would hope that the direction you might approach is to identify and label content. That way, I, as an end user, can set up filters that I know will work and make sure, okay, this content is in this category, this content over here is in that category. And if there was some framework in place that says, okay, content, you can put anything you want on there, but it has to be properly and correctly tagged so that I, as a consumer, can make an informed choice about what content I want to allow into my house. Are there any initiatives along that direction, and what do you see needing to be done, maybe legislatively or by rule, to have something like that happen?
We have a proceeding ongoing right now that actually looks into exactly that. Keep in mind that filtering software does that. So you can have filtering software on your computer that helps filter out at least the pornographic stuff. It's not going to give you ratings, however, so it won't be like this is G-rated, this is PG, you know. And then there's all the confusing ratings of television content, which I don't get, and I'm an FCC commissioner, and it's hard for me to follow. So, but the net neutrality proceeding actually could undermine that as well. So keep that in mind. The proposed rules really could undermine that ability. If all traffic has to be treated the same, what does that mean for these types of initiatives? So keep that in mind.
Commissioner, thanks for being here. Pete Illaway from Wyoming.
Whereabouts?
How could adding more federal regulations help expand broadband and the Internet?
Well, I think one of the areas which is outside the FCC's purview that I would like to see implemented and included in our National Broadband Plan, which is due February 17th to Congress, but I don't know what it's going to look like yet. That's a long story. But anyway, would be some tax incentives. So, for instance, what can we do? You have 92, maybe 95, depending on how you want to count it, % of America has access to some form of broadband technology. You could say 100% if you want to include satellite. Satellite's not good for gaming, for online gaming, but it's good for downloading stuff. It's very strong with that. But anyway, so what can we do to get a higher degree of adoption? If 63% of the households have actually subscribed, but 95% have availability, what do you do to close that gap to get closer to 95% penetration? One thing I think we could do is a tax incentive. So treat capital expenditures as expenses. So in other words, can you expense what would normally be a CapEx to promote telecommuting? Or Wyoming, let's say for a rancher, small business person, so their computer and broadband connection could be expensed more quickly, at least their computer. For technology, accelerate the depreciation schedule as well. I think that would help. What that does, that'll help stimulate more broadband adoption at home, and if there's more broadband adoption at home, that is going to give an incentive to the companies that provide broadband connections to build out to those homes fatter and faster pipes. So the more use you have, hopefully it becomes a virtuous cycle. So I think that's the number one thing we can do. And I really think we need to look at the adoption side as much as anything else, but let's also make sure that $70 billion investment in broadband infrastructure this year that I referred to in my speech, let's make sure that number goes up and not down. Let's make sure what we don't do is to lard on the backs of network operators regulations that might slow them down. President Reagan had a great quote he always used to like to say, which is there are those who, if they see something moving, they'll tax it. If it keeps moving, they regulate it, and when it stops moving, they subsidize it. And we don't want that to happen with the Internet.
This is going to be the last question. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Gene Ward, Hawaii State House. You spoke earlier about, is the Internet broken? On the Broadband Task Force in Hawaii, we looked at what was going around in the rest of the world, and we're like, Korea is 10 times, Japan is 5 times faster than us. Is it about speed that you're not speaking of, or that's another issue, or broken versus meaning something else? But speed is a big concern, and how are we going to catch up with the rest of the world? Even third world countries are surpassing us.
Which third world country is faster than us? Korea is not a third world country.
Some Asian countries that are may not in the OECD yet, but they're catching up really, really quickly. I mean, if Korea is 10 times faster than us and was third world 10 years, 20 years ago, I think we have to be concerned.
So speed, fatter and faster pipes, I talked about that in the speech. What can we do to incentivize? We've talked about just now to encouraging adoption. Korea, keep in mind there are different challenges. If you look at some of the OECD rankings, by the way, statistically are very flawed. I wrote a Wall Street Journal op-ed a couple of years ago about how it's very flawed because it looks at adoption on a subscriber basis per capita versus a household adoption rate. We actually do very well in a household adoption rate. But when it comes to speeds, yes, in Korea, where at least a third, if not almost 50% of the population lives in apartment buildings in a couple of major cities, it's very easy to wire a nation like that with fiber. What we need to do is get more fiber deployed, I think, to get, virtually unlimited bandwidth, certainly 100 megs is the standard right now. With cable modem, so cable reaches about 92% of the American population through basically a software loading and upgrade called DOCSIS 3.0. You can get speeds of 100 megs as well. That's been slow to come, so what can we do to incentivize that? So it sounds easy to load software, but it's actually technically more complex in the cable world. So those are all coming over the horizon. In addition, we have wireless technologies that are coming over the horizon. There's WiMAX that has speeds up to 100 megs. There might be concerns about carrying around a device that has that kind of power on it, and that's something else we can address later. But what we auctioned off in the 700 megahertz, remember the digital television transition of last year? You got so sick of those ads, I'm sure you saw. But anyway, the devices and the networks and devices that we built out there, they have the potential for nationwide ubiquity at 100 megs and maybe up to 6 players per market in addition to your phone company and cable company. And then that's in addition to WiMAX. There's a company called Clearwire which is rolling out across the country as well. So those are all coming over the horizon. I'm pretty bullish on America's future. I think we're going to leapfrog the international community because consumers are really saying they want mobility almost more than anything else. And we're going to be able to offer them mobility along with high speeds, I think. But in the meantime, there is, as I said in the speech, no substitute really for fiber. And we need to keep that trend. Of the past 5 years, we went from 1% of homes passed by fiber to 15% in 5 years. That's very significant. What can we do to make that more of a hockey stick graph? And that's to encourage more capital investment. Last point on the international stuff, too, is keep in mind, if you go to outfits like speedtest.net and others, there are advertised speeds in Japan and Korea, and there are actual speeds. And just like with a car, your mileage may vary. Sometimes we hear they're at 100 megs. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. They also suffer from congestion problems and other such things. But certainly, as I said, we're Americans. We should never be satisfied. We should always be putting the spurs to our steed, our broadband steed, to go faster. And that's what I'm looking to do. Thanks.
Well, if you would all join me, again, the opportunity to have someone from the FCC to speak to these topics is spectacular, and thank you.